Welcome to the Grief Ladies, the practical guide to what comes next. I'm Kelly Daugherty.
And I'm Karyn Arnold, and we are two grief professionals with over 50 years of combined experience. We're here to validate, educate, and give you tangible tools you can actually use.
Each episode motivates you to take action and reminds you it's okay to want to feel better. This is the Grief Ladies, a guide to what comes next.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to our grief podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Kelly Daugherty. I'm Karyn Arnold, and we have a very special guest with us today, Ramona Kossowan, that we're very excited to talk with. So, Ramona, is it okay if I just take a second to read your bio and tell everybody a little bit about you?
That sounds great.
Okay, great. So Ramona is a gentle trauma release practitioner and personal empowerment coach who guides others through the often unseen stages between trauma, transition, and transformation. Her work helps clients heal, not just for themselves, but for the generations of the family line before and after them. She's also a fitness professional, food relationship coach, and founder of Ramona K Coaching. So Ramona, welcome. So much good stuff here. We're already, going to be looking forward to hearing more about that.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
So, Ramona, why don't you tell us a little bit about the work that you do and what you find are some of the challenges, especially with grieving clients that have experienced maybe traumatic loss?
Well, my work has evolved over the years. Like, I've really evolved. I'm a different person than I was 10 years ago. So initially, I was more health and fitness focused, and I even coached a holistic weight loss program. But later, when I became more aware of trauma and the opportunity to work with emotions and trauma and identity, that really connected with me on a deeper level. And a lot of my clients are women in midlife and beyond. I've worked with others, but a lot of women around that demographic work well with me. And what I noticed earlier that I didn't recognize is that women had a hard time sometimes prioritizing themselves. And it was a compulsion to neglect their needs. And it caused guilt and shame, which was compounding my sadness and compassion for them. So that lit a fire in me. It's like, oh, we're gonna do better. We're gonna do better by these women. And now, as I, had the chance for the last 5 years working with the Gentle Trauma Release method, it's really shifted the lenses I see everything through with looking at the emotions and the nervous system. It's like, rather than just looking at anxiety as a problem or depression as a problem, like I'm not talking about medical situations that are beyond my scope, but looking at, or overeating or whatever you think is the problem. Well, what's underneath? Like, our body has wisdom and it's driving the bus here, trying to keep us safe in some way. It always has a reason, so we can respect that.
That's
Yeah.
great. So, I work with a lot of traumatic grief clients. That's probably the majority of my caseload in my private practice is the trauma piece. And I know we talked prior to coming on about, really having to deal with that trauma first, which I'm a big believer in. And so what would be some of the initial things to help somebody be able to learn to reconnect to their body when they are grieving and they've had that traumatic loss?
Well, for me, like, I found it's important to recognize what stage I'm at. Like, are you really raw? Then there's some cocooning probably needing to happen, right? There's going to be normal life, and then, okay, we're not maybe there yet. So for me, there was some cocooning, and I just needed gentleness, a soft place to land, not pushing myself, not thinking too far ahead in the future. So just looking after my body, my immediate family, and spending time with people who felt good to be with was super important in the early stages. And I didn't even though I typically work out as part of my lifestyle, I did not push myself because I've learned that I'm going to hurt myself in that more fragile state. So gentle is the big underlying theme.
Yeah. I think one thing with a lot of the people that I work with, don't always necessarily recognize their loss as being traumatic. I mean, certainly there's plenty of people who do. But I think there are some that if they feel like I worked, Kelly and I both worked for hospice for many, many years. And sometimes I think the message is that if it was a slow progression, a steady decline, if someone passed away, at an advanced age, that maybe there's not a trauma associated with that. And I think there are degrees where, I had a person in a group the other night who was actually the person to find their loved one, who had passed away suddenly. And so certainly that has its own level of trauma. But I think even through the caregiving process, there are things that we are seeing and hearing, smelling, experiencing that are very, very difficult and stay with us. So I guess one question is, do you think people sort of diminish the trauma that they've experienced or not even recognize it in that way at times?
I would say for sure. Like
Yeah.
if you had talked to me, 6 years ago, I'd be like, what trauma? Right. So
Mm.
it's unless you're exposed to if we're talking about death here, like there's other kinds of loss too, of course, but if we're talking about death, if you're not exposed to death on the regular as part of your profession, elements of that are shocking no matter what, and especially when it's someone you care about. Um, and then there could be other elements that layer in and add to that, whether it's an element of injustice. Maybe there was negligence or some other criminal act, right? There's abandonment and betrayal that could be layered into that trauma and not even just the event itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think with that, it probably means that it manifests in a lot of different ways for different people. It's going to come out and show itself. We were speaking with someone earlier about sleep and how sleep can be disruptive. People are kind of replaying moments and returning back to time, where it almost feels like they're right back in that again. What are some of the ways that you see trauma manifest for people through their grieving process?
Are you ready to take the next step on your grief journey with real tools and compassionate guidance? The Grief Ladies are launching a brand new workshop series based on their signature grief GRIEF framework. 5 trail markers to help you find your footing after your loss: grounding, rebuilding, interacting, evolving, and finding. Each workshop focuses on one trail marker, guiding you through practical steps to move from surviving to living again, all in a space that's honest, supportive, and real. Led by grief experts Kelly Daugherty and Karyn Arnold, these workshops combine decades of experience with tools you can start using today. Visit griefladies.com to explore the upcoming workshops, because you don't have to climb this mountain alone.
Well, what I noticed, especially during the pandemic times, it seemed to really amp that up. And some clients that I was normally seeing for other things like fitness, I knew they had both experienced a loss, a sudden death of their spouse, and they weren't necessarily coming to me for that at that time. Um, they were, it was their life stood still. So we add the pandemic stuff, shenanigans, and all that stress to this, and there was just no seeing a path forward in their lives, and that's where I encourage them to consider getting some help with the actual trauma. But it can also be, like you said, sleep, a physical symptom, or just a complete loss of identity. Um, yes, your life may not look like what you thought, but you're still a person. There's still you, right? So there's the loss of identity, loss of hope for a bright future, even other things like pain and indigestion and food intolerances. There's a lot that can come up.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious for those listening, I know a little bit about this, but other people may not. What is a gentle trauma release practitioner? What does that even mean? And what would that look like if they were to have a session with you?
Good question. So this is a standalone holistic method, and it is based on the polyvagal theory. So it's based on the nervous system and research that exists about trauma, but it takes all of this stuff that seems kind of up there and brings it down to super accessible to both the client and the practitioner, um, so that people can experience immediate relief. It can start from the first call. So, for example, one of my recent fitness clients had lost a spouse suddenly and had had insomnia since then, and that was 7 years. So we did one call together and used the body integrated methods. We worked on one particular memory, not the biggest one, but something kind of adjacent to it. And what's interesting is that her insomnia went away in one coaching call after 7 years, because first of all, there was some stuff attached to that, but her body, it felt safe. So in the early stages of this process, it's about getting underneath in a very strategic way. It's not general. It's not, we're going to start this and that and hope and see. It's strategic. And then it's always about empowering them to maintain their well-being and integrate this healing into their current lives and how they show up for themselves.
Yeah. So what are some techniques or tools that you think you could share with our listeners that would maybe help them be able to help learn to regulate their nervous system?
It's always about safety. So healing trauma at the root is safety. So the work, the more therapeutic work together is about creating safety in a strategic way. So what creates safety in your body? So it can be as simple as having a warm breakfast in the morning and sitting and chewing, right? You're giving your body that message of safety, gentle, safe touch, whether it's from someone you care about or a pet, that connection of touch. Routines that give your body the message, I care about you, I'm here for you, and rather than throwing your needs aside to perform, achieve, please, whatever it is. So rituals and routines that give your body that message of being cared for um, always are a wonderful place to start.
Yeah, the foundations. And that's really what our grief and action framework is built on, is that, the G, the grounding is about the foundations, right? The sleep, the eating, our moving our body, these things that we need to really be able to do to take care of ourselves. And if we don't have those foundations, we can't do all these other things, right? Attend to life and really and do the harder work as well. If we don't have any of those foundations, we can't do the tough stuff that we maybe need to do to process our grief.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like there's no use trying to work on stuff when your body doesn't feel safe. It's just going
Exactly,
to protect and
exactly.
lock down like no, 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 right? So
Mhm.
how do we just create safety? And even I think it's important too, um, when you're going through a stage of grieving, like say even a divorce, right? Or
Mhm.
something that's a different kind of loss, where can you go that you don't have to pretend to be okay
Mhm.
and perform? Because sometimes I find people are feeling like they're expected to be their old selves, and insert themselves as the soccer mom or whatever it was. It's like you're not that person anymore. You're going to evolve into a new person, but if you have to insert yourself where you need to perform, that may not be supportive of you right now. Like where can you go and just be and people will allow you to be and feel what you need to be at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Ramona, based on your bio, you have you're a fitness professional and help people with food relationships and things like that. And obviously, we can see your background is a gym here. And so, how important do you think incorporating movement in for grieving individuals is?
I think it's amazing, and I think we can tailor it to the stage that we're at. So I know
Hmm.
when I've been in a stage where I'm healing or grieving, um, I'm not going to push myself and bust my butt doing running or heavy lifting, but just get outside and move, right? So because you get that double whammy, you get the nature, the change of scenery, moving, your lymphatic system, your breathing, and it's like a switch, right? So that's a very easy thing that you can access. Hopefully you live where the sidewalks aren't frozen for 6 months of the year, like where I am.
Both
But
of us. Oh.
yes, long term over time, considering your capacity, I think adding in strength training at some level suited to your capacity, it really does change your physiology. It changes your energy, your mental outlook, your sense of self. So over time, integrating strength training appropriately can be a great long-term tool.
Yeah.
Do you have any experience with utilizing like shaking techniques to help clients get rid of some of the trauma out of their body? Do you ever do anything like
That's
that?
not really part of the process. Like, so for me,
No.
when I'm working with someone and addressing trauma, we look for emotions and specific events and memories as we gently uncover and we strategically go to those first. And what happens is we systematically de-traumatize the nervous system in the process. So it just gets easier, and it just, you don't have so much load. But then I do but there's practices that we use within that we teach the clients and give them as a toolbox. And then what is supportive to them. So if it's supportive to them to do other practices, cool. But it's not really needed with the framework that I use.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I really like that you talked about the word safety, because I think a lot of times people are facing the significant loss of a loved one who made them feel safe, maybe a parent or a spouse or a partner. And so that's a really big issue for people. I think also recognizing that sometimes when they're struggling to interact with people who are here, maybe they're not always feeling emotionally safe, or like you said, they have to kind of put on the mask. So these are really important things to be working with people and kind of helping them through, and helping them understand that these are some of the other challenges besides just the grief. There's so much more, and I think it sounds like what you're doing is very holistic, like you're really trying to look at the whole person. And I think sometimes people think, well, if I lost my parent, what difference does it make if I change my nutrition up or if I'm walking a little bit more? But what would you say to that if someone is kind of challenging that idea of, what difference it would make for them?
I always just meet people where their willingness is at. So some people are not going to do strength training. Okay, what are you willing to do? And I think it depends on our desire, because we're not going to do anything uncomfortable if it's not based on a desire that we have and can't lead people there. So I try to just meet people and see what would move them towards how they want to feel, where they're leaning in, going, yeah, yeah, I can do that. So if there's no, we're not even gonna go there, right? At no
Yeah.
point. Um, so I think I like to get curious about what a person really wants. What do they want? And what's the bridge to get you there? And that's all I'm here for. And if what I can do to help people is not what they want, I'm not going to try to take them there. So it's always about what they want or what they can see for themselves, even if they can't quite imagine it yet because they haven't experienced it yet, as long as it's a desire.
Yeah. I have to imagine your approach too gives people permission, that gentleness to be gentle with themselves. I think sometimes people are kind of forcing themselves or pushing a timeline or thinking, well, I guess I need to do this, or I should I hear people say that I need to force myself to do this. And it's a really hard mindset to do, to go into anything. So I like the way you're describing it, because it's just a really important reminder to people to, we talk about meeting them where they're at, meet themselves where they're at. Like, let's just be honest about what you feel like you can and can't do right now. People are like, I have to go out of my comfort zone. It's like, you're already out of your comfort zone. You're way out of that comfort zone. So I don't think any of us, as we're working with people, want them to feel like they need to be pushing themselves that much more. It's just about trying to, as you said, regulate some things, make it feel a little bit more safe. It just sounds really important, as an approach to do that.
Yeah, I think sustainability is huge. And
Mm,
I think sometimes we don't realize until we go through a significant crisis or upheaval or trauma that we've already been living in survival mode,
yeah.
pushing and forcing and ramrodding ourselves into whatever it is we think. And then our body's like, hold up, woman, that's not going to fly anymore. We are done, right? So sometimes these big life upheavals force us to take a different approach and realize that's not serving me anymore. Um, there's a difference between having a desire where you have to stretch versus beating yourself up continually and having no joy, right? If there's no joy, why are you doing this, right? So let's think about what's going to bring you joy or satisfaction or pride in yourself.
Looking for a grief community that actually feels supportive, not overwhelming? We built one. The Grief Ladies community on Facebook is a private, free space where you can connect with others who are navigating life after someone they love has died. Inside, you'll find weekly prompts, practical tools, conversations that feel real, not sugarcoated, and a place where your person is honored. If you want steady support and a community that understand what your days look like right now, come join us. Search the Grief Ladies community on Facebook or tap the link in our bio.
So I know I'm going to ask to kind of go backwards a little bit. And it's just because this has come up in several of our podcasts up until this point. And as a therapist, I'm very familiar with it, but I'm not so sure how well other people may be familiar with it. Is you've mentioned the polyvagal theory and the nervous system. And so could you maybe just give us a good explanation for those listeners that are like, what are you talking about? And why does that term keep coming up in your podcasts?
Okay. Yeah, like if you're not already in the realm of trauma work, this doesn't necessarily, and even if you hear the term nervous system dysregulation, like what's that? Right? I would have
Exactly.
said 6 years ago, I don't know what you're talking about. But basically, we have our unconscious nervous system, and the more recent research is shining a light on our most primitive nervous system. So the dorsal vagal, like the shutdown, the freeze. Think of the rabbit being chased by the coyote. And then the ventral vagus nerve, which runs all over your body, and it's saying, we like this, we feel safe. So even just sitting and chewing a warm meal is telling your ventral vagus nerve, we be safe right now, we're good. Gentle touch. Even to think of elements of EMDR, right? We're doing the eye movements and the head movements. Those are all activating different points of the ventral vagus nerve, so our large nervous system. And what's interesting is it runs from your body to your brain. So in the more therapeutic work where I've seen um, traumatic events dissolve into nothing and stay that way, what happens is we accessed the intensity just enough to tell your body that's the threat. And then we go through a series of giving your body the cues of safety, cues of safety, cues of safety. And then your body goes, it's kind of hard to recall. It's further away. It's like it's a movie over there. And I just feel kind of neutral about it. There's other pieces that sometimes come into it as well. It's not just one thing. But basically, it's just working with the nervous system, and there's elements of touch and movement typically involved that tell your body, girl, you're safe. And we get this naturally in life, like when we make eye contact with someone safe and opening, welcoming body language, our social circle where we feel at home, that is activating our ventral vagus nerve, right? So when we get a kiss or a cuddle or we stroke our dog's head, that is activating our ventral vagus nerve. We just don't necessarily know that that's what it's doing. It just feels good. So because trauma is a bodily response, just working with the head doesn't resolve. We want resolve. So that's the idea in, like hopefully a
Yeah,
pared
and
down
absolutely.
version.
And I think, the biggest thing is when we go through a significant loss that is maybe traumatic or just shocking, right, to our nervous system, our sense of safety has been threatened so much, right? And so we are going down that ladder, right? And we're down into that fight or flight response. And we need to be able to learn how to regulate to get back up to that feeling safe and connected. And what does that look like for people? And being able to help people identify those situations and the people in their life, right? Because not everybody is going to give us that safe and connected feeling that we want.
Even when they're well-meaning. So some things, sometimes I need to point out to people that someone can be a good person and well-meaning and not be necessarily emotionally safe for you at this particular time.
Yeah, right
For
now, right?
example,
They may
the
not be.
emotionally shut down mother that goes, well, are you sure it's trauma? Is it trauma? Right? And like totally invalidated her, right? And or someone who's really quite dysregulated themselves and relies heavily on alcohol or whatever the thing is like, I can't be around that person right now. So it's okay. It doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't make them a bad person. It means they're not a good fit for your well-being at this time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, we don't always think about it that way, that these don't feel safe right now to us, right? We just know we don't feel right. but
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you feel your body bracing, right? If your body's
Mhm.
bracing or shutting down, that's a pretty good indicator.
So, Ramona, I'm curious. We kind of talked prior to we got on today, but I'm curious, would you be willing to share a little bit about your own grief experiences that you've gone through and what you've learned? And you've mentioned some things to us prior, which I think for people listening would be really helpful for you to share.
Yeah. Like it even helps me from the perspective of understanding some of my clients' experiences and what they might be feeling. So I think if we're thinking of loss of a person, my dad died in 2016 with esophageal cancer. And the illness itself was traumatic, seeing his rapid decline and seeing him in that state, especially when he gave up on treatment and you knew that there was no more hope. And then seeing him in his worst possible condition and then processing the end of his life, right? So there was that tied up with his second wife, who was quite adversarial, and me being stuck with some estate business that was completely overwhelming. So the whole thing, it beat my nervous system to heck. Like I was a mess. But so I gave myself some space. So that was like in September of 2016. I gave myself some space and I just processed and connected with the people who could understand, like some of my siblings. I'm the oldest of seven. Um, it was complicated because it wasn't just, oh, I lost my dad. I had to grieve the safe, loving presence that I wished I had. Did not. So he was my only dad, and it wasn't all bad, but he wasn't the safe, loving, grounding support that I needed as an adult or a child. And there were times that that safety and respect was ruptured and never repaired. So there's the grieving what was never, the closure that was never had, the childhood I did not get, the dad I did not have that I truly needed, and then the reality of this person and the compassion for what he was going through, and the whole thing. So there was a lot wrapped up in that. At the time, I had not received any trauma training or coaching, and I wasn't really super up on that. So I did address some of that a little later on when I was going through my own training. I worked with my own coach because there was a lot to unpack in
Yeah.
there. But
Yeah, I mean, what so many of our clients, we don't just grieve for the death or the loss. We grieve for what could have been. We grieve for the future that we never got to have, or the closure we didn't get to have with them, or the words, the things left unsaid, and how that can really, we have to grieve all of those losses as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's what was interesting is that I allowed things to unfold. But I came to a point the following year, and sometimes they say it's kind of like with a bow and arrow, like you pull the bow. And I was like, oh. And the following year, I had some big shifts forward, and I moved forward with courage with some changes in my life. So I think that painful time kind of pulled me back a bit and brought my vision back to what I truly wanted it, and it did help me ultimately move forward with some big leaps of faith and some courageous steps in my life.
Well, it definitely sounds like you have taken your experiences and used that to not only heal yourself, but then to find ways to work with others. And I think that's always such a inspiring part of all this because you've really kind of walked the walk. You've gone through some difficult times, and it really is just demonstrating that these things can work and they can help, which is why, so often Kelly and I are talking to people and they'll say, I don't know what to do. And it's just kind of this general statement. And we're really, with the belief that there are things you can do. And you've described so much of that today. So, in terms of like a takeaway, because we want to send someone home with an action step, they're listening to this, and, maybe for the next week, something that they could be mindful of or something they could be working on that would help with some of the things you've talked about today. What would be a suggestion that you would give to someone to take action today?
Well, one suggestion that I'd given in different forms, and most recently to a client who's recovering from a loss and also past trauma is I think it's time for your selfish era to unfold. I added a little expletive there, but it was sometimes we think we're being selfish, but you're not being nearly selfish enough. Not really. So if you were to not consider other people's expectations for a moment or what you normally would do or think you should, what do you really want? And how can you move ever so slightly towards what you want just for you, for nothing other than your good old, plain old selfish, I'm worthy, love and on. Like take that 5-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old version of you, hug her close, bring her in. What do I need as my whole self if I was being utterly selfish? I can just about guarantee that it's not selfish enough up until this point. What would give you something to be excited about?
Yeah, and I think we are so conditioned to be putting other people first. And prior to significant change or loss in life, maybe we have the ability and the stamina to do it. We probably shouldn't even be doing it as much as we are, but we do. But these are times where I feel like all the rules change. All the things that we did before, all those ways that we just kind of had automatic responses to things and putting other people first, we have to remember that we don't really have a choice. We are in like a survival mode right now. The rules do have to be a little bit different. And prioritizing ourselves and our needs is going to just have to look totally different than it did before. So I think that's a good, the selfish era. People need to hear that and get permission to do that because it's really hard to do it for yourself, I think.
Well, I think it's important to take the pressure off to be your old self because
Mm.
maybe you're not going to be that person and it's okay. You can evolve into the new version of you. But where are you needing to be a little more selfish? I
Yeah.
guarantee you're not going to go overboard and become this complete bore. You're not. It's not going to happen. You're listening to this podcast. You're not. So how can you be a little more selfish and lean into something that feels really juicy to you?
Yeah. That's great. I think that's a very great point. There's no chance of anybody overdoing it.
No,
You know?
I
Yeah.
guarantee if they're listening to this podcast, they're not. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
You're absolutely right. That's great, Ramona. Thank you so much.
you're so
So,
welcome.
Ramona, for those people that would be interested in connecting with you, what would be the best way to do that?
Well, I have two websites. One is more specific to my gentle trauma coaching, and then it has ways to link with me from there. So that's gentletraumacoach.com. And then I have the broader spectrum of the different areas that I do on my other website. It's ramonakcoaching.com. And so from there, I'll have different ways you can connect with me on socials or read my blogs or receive free goodies from me.
Oh, that sounds good.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ramona, for what you shared today. And I really love the idea. Everybody try to think about what feels juicy this week and maybe be a little more selfish and do something kind for yourself. I love that. And so thanks for being here with us. And we'll be back next week for some more tips and techniques and action steps to help you on your grief journey. So take care. Thanks, Ramona, and thanks, Karen.
Yeah. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks,
Thanks so
Ramona.
much.
Thanks for joining us on The Grief Ladies.
Don't wait to feel better to get started. Getting started is what makes you feel better. Put this week's tool to work.
If today's episode helped, share it with someone who needs it and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you.
And remember, we're here for you, your trusted grief ladies, navigating this path together.